Marty, since you've been back on every stage, it seems like you talk about your fresh, new perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the draft here, how could you describe your new perspective in your years off going into this one, as far as how you might draft?
I think hopefully it's sort of the same mindset that we've used the entire offseason. And I think that, we've done well in free agency by being very thorough, which we always are, but probably patience is the key word, being patient. We let free agency come to us. I think starting Thursday night, I think that we are extremely well prepared. We've covered all scenarios, and now you just let the board come to you, and you don't fall in love with a player. You don't overreact. You just try to do what you think is best, and that's not to say, listen, every draft has a different character to it. So we could trade up, we could trade back, but I think it's in the decision-making process. You've covered all your bases. Now don't get caught up in the moment. Just be patient and let the board come to you. And I think we did that in free agency, and I think it worked out well for us.
How much flexibility do you have specifically sitting at that 24 spot in your experience in order to maybe trade up or trade back extra picks later on down the road?
I don't think you ever know, but I think that you're always probably going to get calls. Now it's funny because, we've been sitting at 1 and 2 at times in past drafts, and you thought the phone would be ringing off the hook, and it's not. But I think in this draft at 24, we'll probably get calls either way. And, again, what we do will depend on how the draft has gone at that point.
But you're not shutting down the possibility of either?
No, all options are open.
Do you expect a lot of movement in this draft, not necessarily from the Panthers, but overall, specifically in the first round in terms of trades?
I think maybe high in the first round with the quarterbacks, and then I think the movement might come more in the second and third rounds, because I think there's the strength of this draft is in those rounds. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see people trading to move up to get picks in either higher in those rounds or get into those rounds. But you just never know. There are drafts you go into and you think there's going to be a ton of movement, and there's none, and then others that you think people sit pat and there's movement. So that's the fun thing about the draft. You don't know what's going to happen.
Well, you always draft, for best player available. But what would you say are some of the needs that you guys have at this point in the season?
Well, I think we're in a little bit of a unique position because, especially in the early rounds, outside of quarterback, I think we could bring a player in if we think he'll have an impact at pretty much any other position except for quarterback, and that's basically because I think with free agency and what we've done, we feel like we've got some depth at all the positions. But, the draft is about, especially the first couple rounds, the draft's about hopefully trying to target future impact players, guys who can come in and make an impact for 4 or 5 plus years. So I think that, and I think Ron agrees, we feel like we're in that position where there's not 1 or 2 position groups that we say, listen, we got to go in and get a guy to help here, because we did fill some of those holes, at least for competition-wise, in free agents.
When you look at this board, do you see a particular position or side of the ball that's stronger, than others? Like, where is the strength in this draft, position-wise?
You keep hearing people say that they think other than the quarterbacks, the top part's going to be defense. I'm not sure of that. I think that it's kind of a different draft where, other than you say, okay, the quarterbacks, there's going to be a lot go high. I don't know whether there's one position you say, okay, that's the strongest position. Now, all those positions have strength in groups, and that's basically the key to how you draft. We do our board vertically, and then we do it horizontally, and as you go across, there are pods of players in each group, in each round, that you hope are there, or at least, several of them are there so you can decide. And I think that in this draft, every position's got sort of an area where it might be a little stronger than others. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Marty, you mentioned quarterbacks. What's Derek's situation, and how will that affect, if at all, what you do at that position potentially this weekend?
we are talking, we have talked and are talking to Derek, but I think anytime, Ron Wolf had a saying that said, he believed in every draft you should take a quarterback, a young quarterback to develop. If you didn't develop into a player for you, then he would have value. If he was a player, he would have trade value. I think that, every draft you look for those young quarterbacks because, that's the position in this league that makes the most difference. And that it's probably you go through the rosters and it's the position that everybody is looking for, either, some starters, some backups, but I think you're always looking at quarterbacks in the mid to low rounds. Now, whether it works out that way, that's, how the draft goes.
For either one of you guys, Marty, you said that you've covered all the scenarios at 24. There's a lot of scenarios there. What's the mock process like from 1 to 23 that you guys do? How many mocks do you guys, 8 to 10, 12? What's that process like?
I'm not a believer. We don't assign guys teams and go around the room, but what we do is basically we just keep throwing scenarios out. And let's say you have a group of players that you say, okay, if we've got 8 guys that are 24 and then you rank them and how you're happy with them. All right, now what happens if those are gone and you're at 24? Well, naturally, first response will be, okay, try to trade back. Wonder if you get stuck. Then who's that next group? Who's that next guy? Who's the emergency guy? And we just go through all kinds of scenarios as far as if this guy's gone and this group's left, who would you do? But basically it comes down to ranking a group of guys that you think are going to be there and then going to the next scenario with, okay, if they're not there, what do you do? What's your emergency plan? Do you try to trade back? If you can't trade back, what do you do? And you do that in every round, particularly the first 3 rounds.
So you worry less about what's happening at 1 through 5, for example, and you worry more about what's happening in the middle to later chunk of the
Exactly,
draft.
and that's going to be the key to this, and especially this draft. I think that you're going to get to, for us, it probably starts at 18 or 19, because then what happens between 18 and 23 is going to affect who's there for us.
You guys, we keep hearing best available. What are the characteristics that make him the best available player when you guys are on the clock? What are you looking for in a player that's on the board that's best available? What are the characteristics that make him a man?
That's for you.
Well, first of all, the biggest thing, more so than anything else, is it a position of need for us at that point? That's probably one of the biggest things I look at. And then, if it is a position, how does he fit us? Does that make him the best available for me? So that's the way I'm going to look at it, and we'll break it down that way. So as you go across the board, as Marty says, you look at that pot of players, that we hope is there, and we can decide upon, from the group, that's what we'll do. Or at least that's, in my mind, how I will see it. And that's what makes a guy best available is, does he have the skill set to fit what we want to do at a position that we feel we need?
Marty, you had mentioned prior that you want to get younger and faster at the skill positions. I know in free agency, bring in a couple of solid guys, Torrey Smith, Jarius Wright. But do you feel confident in specifically the way your secondary is composed currently, and do you feel like there might be a premium on those guys in the draft?
Well, again, I think that obviously we would love to be able to keep adding parts to the secondary as well as other positions. It's going to depend how the draft falls. We're not going to reach for somebody because he's a safety. We haven't lined up, and obviously if that right guy's there to help us. But I do think there are skill positions. I think if we can help the secondary, if we can help the pass rush, if we can add skill players on the offensive side of the ball to help us, I think that that's something that we would love to do, while still keeping our offensive line and defensive line strong, because really that's the key. And you've got to protect the passer and rush the passer. That's 2 of the keys in this league. So really that's, when you ask about the procedure and what might change, I think it's when I say, that's what I mean by letting the board come to us and not having any positions that you might want to have to feel like there's more of a priority for it, because that's when you tend to, okay, maybe reach for a player. And what you want to do in every draft is just get good players to help you, especially the first 3 rounds. We have 4 picks. Obviously, we would like to get 4 players, if it works that way, to come in and compete for a role and have some impact. And then you'd like the lower guys to come in and compete for, to be special teams contributors and grow. And as long as you do that and you draft good players, then I think everything takes care of itself. We did in free agency. I mean, Ross Cockrell and Cersei, I think we feel like, and Ron can speak to them, I think it's 2 players we feel good about. So it helped increase our competition and depth there. But obviously, I mean, that's, as I said, every position, I think if we feel a guy has a chance to come in and make an impact, that's going to be open for discussion.
Marty, the experience of watching the draft the last six years and kind of looking at what every team did, what did that do in terms of your perspective and maybe some new approaches?
That was probably the hardest thing. I mean, because you do this is the fun part of the job. This is what gets your juices flowing. And I think that it did help sitting back and watching and the whole notion about letting the board come to you and being patient and, watching what teams do. It's really, it's a lot easier to kind of, when you're detached from it, to formulate objective opinions about what people do and how they approach it, versus being in the thick of things. And I would sit and watch, or if I had to go out, I would listen, and I'd listen very intently to who the Panthers picked. And to me, this is just, when you do what we do, this is one of the most exciting times of the year.
Did your philosophy change at all in terms of how you evaluate guys, or just kind of how you approached it?
No, I don't think the evaluation has changed at all. Now you're talking about, again, decision-making process and how you come to, how you handle certain things. And, I can tell you right now that you can consider next year's first safe. I don't think we're going to be trading next year's first. Then when you step back and you look at things and some of the things you've done, I think that, those type of things, that you kind of look at what you did and what you can do better. You also look at what you did well and want to try to improve on that.
So just to be clear, trading, that's a bit of a change in philosophy from previous drafts, when those first round picks, you use them as capital.
Yeah, we'll be getting calls, so that's why if you can just tweet that out, so maybe it'll help the people on the phones.
Marty, that being said, where's the line between letting everything come to you and that patient side that you touched on, versus knowing that at some point you will have to go after it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's how the draft unfolds. If you're sitting, say you're sitting at 24 and you have a group of players that you think have a gap between the next group, and that first group is starting to thin out, it doesn't mean that you don't think about trading up to try to get one of those guys. Conversely, if there's a large group there and they're still there, maybe it means you can trade back and add picks and still get one of those group of players. So, how the draft goes really is going to dictate what we do.
Ron, obviously things are so fluid right now in terms of the draft board and evaluations, but how does it change things when you see guys come in for workouts and obviously not that much interaction with them, but knowing how they come in shape, out of shape, and how, especially that defensive end group, there's a step that I think some of the backup guys, you may have wanted them to take forward to provide that depth, and how did they look when they came in?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really haven't had an opportunity to watch those guys on the field, so I really couldn't tell you that much. But, you have a group of guys that you are counting on most certainly to step up. And you start with the defensive line. I do agree that some of those young guys most certainly do have to step up and show us that they can play. And the same thing with some of the young defensive backs. We've got to, we still don't know a lot about Corn Elder, a young man we drafted last year that we feel that can come in and contribute. So he could be part of the solution. And again, we don't know that until we get a chance to start working with them and getting our hands on it. I mean, for right now, they're doing their lifting, they're doing their running, but that's all under the guidance of our strength conditioning program right now. We are meeting with the guys and had an opportunity to visit with those guys and see what the retention is. That's been great. So that's the hard part. We really don't know what we have in some of these young guys But I most certainly, do appreciate the opportunity to talk about the fact that some of these young guys do need to step up because we're going to count on them.
So what you're saying is it can't be a variable right now because you just haven't
No.
seen them on the field.
It's not a variable in terms of making decisions as to what is a position of need. It really isn't. It's almost a guess. But, you come out of this and you sit there and you can say to yourself, hey, we don't know what he can do. He didn't play a lot last year. He didn't play at all. You look at him almost like a draft pick, or a redshirt year. So he's a guy that's going to get an opportunity. He'll be part of the mix. And, we'll have to make a decision off of that as we start going and get further and further into the workout program.
Marty, how many of your 30 did you use, and were you on the road as much as your first stint, more, less, about the same?
I believe we brought in 29, and yeah, I went out a good bit. I just like going out and matching the athletic traits with what you see on tape. And again, I can't stress there's, the key to this whole thing is communication we have with our scouts. Jeff Morrow, our director of college scouting, does a terrific job. Communicate with Ron and the coaches, and I think everybody is on the same page. I mean, even if, you might have disagreements in certain areas, but the communication, I think, is critical in going into any draft and really any process of this, whether it's free agency, whether it's the 53 player cuts, or whether it's the draft. I think we have very good communication from our scouts to our coaches. Ron and I talk constantly. Jeff Morrow and I have talked every day for the last 4 months, and there won't be a lot of surprises.
Ron, you have a new offensive coordinator, and he's had success with certain type of players. When you look at the board, do you look for certain guys that fit your new coordinator's type of offense?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, at the end of the day, though, whoever you end up with, you're going to play to their strengths. You're going to want to put them in position to have success. And, having been around Norv and been part of, the teams that he's had a lot of success with on the offensive side in San Diego, I have a feel for what I believe he's looking for. He's made it very clear as to who he believes fits, what he wants to do. And that's what's exciting. Is as Marty said, we've communicated that in all three phases. We've listened to what Chase has had to say about special teams. We've heard what Eric is looking for on the defensive side. And as I said, Coach Turner's really talked about what he feels who he feels will fit exactly what we want to do.
Ron, to stay with offense for a second, do you think, as constituted right now, you have enough offensive playmakers at the skill positions to win?
I think we do. I do. I mean, we went out and brought Torrey Smith in, who's got tremendous speeds. We've got Jarris Wright, who we brought in, who understands to play the slot position for what we want to do. We got Devin Funches, who can go and make some plays for us. We like our tight end position. We like what we have at running back right now. The offensive line, I think, is solid. We have a question mark at left guard, obviously, but we have some guys that have played that position for us, have started that position for us. We've won games with them at those positions. So, yeah, I think we have. I really do. I think our quarterback is trending in the right direction.
So when it comes to drafting and developing players, obviously a GM has to think about the long term, whereas a coach might be more concerned about the short term. How do you guys balance those short and long-term needs? Maybe because you guys have known each other for a while, it might be easier, perhaps?
It's really, I mean, with Ron and I, first of all, it's easy because we look at things the same way. I mean, philosophically, and a lot of times we can look at players or talk about a subject, and we just look at things so similarly. And there's going to be areas that we disagree, and then we work them out because we think similarly. So that's very easy when you start with that. It makes it a lot easier, I should say. And then you just work through them, and you talk out why. And why you feel a certain way is important, because that really does lead to resolution. And I think the first 3 rounds, you would like to get players that come in and contribute in some role that first year and can get better and move on. And then after that, I think that you're looking for guys that can come in help on special teams and maybe fill a role here and there, but develop for the future. And, we see that the same way. We see a lot of things very similarly, although we do disagree pretty much every day on things, but we work it out and we can communicate. I think there's a trust factor between the two of us that helps do that.
The biggest thing is we all understand what our goal is. And it's not to get into playoffs or anything like that. It's to win. And so we start with that, obviously. And then I think we share in the philosophy of how we want to be the type of offense we want to be, how aggressive we want to be on the defensive side, and what we're looking for on special teams. I think you start with that and making sure that those are similar, which they are. It makes it easy talking about players. We finish the season every year. We discuss what happened with the season. And we talked about what we feel our holes, what we need to do to improve. And from that point, then we start talking about individual players and positions. And I think that's part of the process that we've used, this year, and I think it's worked very well. We have obviously some players in mind that we both have talked about over and over and over. The last few times we've gotten together, last Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, this morning, we started off right away, talking right on the board. Marty pulls the board up and we go right through it. Right now, it's fluid, as was stated earlier, and our minds change, and we talk about it. And it'll probably keep changing until Thursday at about 10:40 when we get a chance to make our pick.
Marty, in most past years, especially with the higher picks, they've met with Jerry ahead of time. Did that happen this year, and do you know if he'll be involved Thursday night?
No, we brought in the as I say, 29 players and met with the coaches and myself and the scouts when we were around. I don't know what Thursday's plans are. So.
Marty, where did you watch the last few drafts? In a bar or?
Nah, at home. At home. At home. It was mostly at home, and the only weird part is when I was in the car, I'd turn on listen to it on the radio. So, but yeah, I mean, it's something that's really interesting to me, and just how every team approaches it differently, and it's just an exciting event.
Did you do a live remote one year?
Don't go there.
You did too. See, I know you did.
So many of these players are equal and come down to maybe a coin flip. What's that one characteristic that puts player A over B or player B over A?
Let me just say we're not going to flip a coin, okay? It does come down to then, okay, who is going to come in and have the most immediate impact? If you're talking about especially in the first round, we have position traits and again, accountability and character and who has that Panther DNA plus who can come in and help us have the biggest impact on us initially. And it gets hard when you have 4 or 5 guys that you think can fill all those needs. Now you're saying, okay, that's where the position comes in as far as who's got the greatest impact to start and then who's got the biggest upside.
Charles Johnson, one more after this. Julius, obviously 37, defensive end, a priority in this draft.
I just what I said at the beginning. I think we're at a spot that it's one of the spots where if there's somebody there, but we also feel like we have some young guys in there. There really isn't a position that you say, okay, we have to get somebody there. I think that we feel like we've got competition and with some young guys that we think can come up and improve. And the board's just going to dictate who we take there.
Do you think there's an opportunity to get a day one starter at the 24th pick?
Hope so.
Character issues, Marty. I know some teams actually take players off the board because of those. Do y'all subscribe to that philosophy? And if so, how many did you remove?
We do. There's guys that there's certain guys you remove, and then there are certain guys that are up there, and you just you just know. And obviously that's always been important to us. So I couldn't tell you a number, but it is a factor in our decision making.
When you
Thank
say
you.
you
Last
keep
one.
some guys up there and then some guys you know, what does that mean specifically?
I know in my head
What do you know in your head?
that we probably wouldn't take them, or that they probably would not. You know, there are guys that you say are borderline, and you know, you'd probably go right or left.
Thank you guys.